Hello, and welcome to a special episode of the Victor 200, where today we're going to be looking at some of my favorite Hellscube 1 cards that I didn't design. Over the past 25 days, I've been going through all of my cards that made it to Hellscube 1, and you can find all of those on my channel. But today I thought, well, there's a lot more to Hellscube than just me. There's a lot of really interesting card designs from Hellscube 1 that I thought would be interesting to take a look at, and in a lot of different styles as well. So I've picked 25 of my favorites, not necessarily my top 25, but a mix where we can see a lot of the different archetypes emerging from Hells 1, a lot of the different formatting, a lot of the cards that are still relevant in Hellscube to this day, either because of what they've caused or just because they're still in some of the constructed formats. They're not in any particular order. I just thought this would be a nice order where we can go and see them. So let's start with Thalia, Guardian Against Bullshit. It's 1 and a white for a 2/1 legendary creature human meme lord. It has Companion. You lose the game to some bullshit. First strike, and you can't lose the game except by having 0 or less life. Now, back in Hellscube 1, Companion was still a pretty new mechanic. In fact, we predated Companion slightly. There's a few cards that have Need, which lets you put them from your sideboard onto the top of your deck, which is slightly more balanced than Companion. But I really like what Thalia is doing here. I really like how this can't be a match or a game 1 companion. You need to have lost the game, and then you can cast it. But not just any losing, it has to be like getting comboed out but not going down to 0 life. Maybe they had an alternate win con. To my knowledge, this card was never particularly good, but I just really like the ingenuity around playing with a companion cost that can't necessarily always be achieved. It's still a 2/1 first strike for 2, which isn't amazing, and the last line of text also doesn't matter most of the time, but I'm still just a Thalia fan, so I'm happy to see Thalia get some representation in the form of a fun companion gimmick. Next up, we've got Thinking About Volleyballs. This is an instant for 1 black mana. Create 3 volleyball tokens. If you were to ask a lot of the old guard from Hellscube 1 what one of their favorite cards is, I think Thinking About Volleyballs would be really high up. It's the art from One Was Nothing, but instead of whatever One Was Nothing was doing with this, they've re-envisioned it. You can see the 3 volleyballs in the art, and then they just make 3 volleyballs. It's nice, simple design. It doesn't do too much. It is relatively strong, especially by some of the modern cube standards, but it's still just very evocative. Next up, we've got Dennis. Dennis is a 4/6 legendary creature human rogue for 3 black, and Dennis has Menace. And this, of course, is a reference to Dennis the Menace. This is one of my favorite style of cards. Cards where they've got 1 or 2 abilities, and together, the abilities with the name just makes an actual character. Also in this vein, we've got Squid with Ward 4 to make Squidward. I've made a few of these, so you'll see some of these later on in the Victor 200, but this always feels really clean. It's not mechanically interesting by any stretch, it's just a French vanilla creature, but I think part of what makes Hellscube so fun is the fact that we've got this weird mishmash of a bunch of different designs, and all of them merged together. If it was a cube where every single card had 12 lines of text, it wouldn't be particularly fun or even easy to draft. But when you've got some of these really simple, straightforward, elegantly done jokes also in the packs, it's a lot easier for players to digest. Again, this is one of my favorite style of cards. In all, I just really like how short and sweet it is. On the flip side, we've got Crypt Command. It's an instant for 1 black, black, black. Choose 2. Target player sacrifices a spell, destroy target creature, then return it to its owner's hand. Regenerate all creatures your opponents control, then destroy them. And search the top card of your library for a card, and put it into your hand. If you read that or heard me read it, and thought to yourself, this sounds an awful lot like Cryptic Command, you would be right. There's another genre of Hellscube card, which is just changing a card from one color to another, and then rephrasing or reformatting it so that it feels more like it's in the second color's abilities. And you can see that in all 4 of these modes. They all really sound like what a black card is going to do. It's sacrificing, it's destroying, it's searching your library, it's regenerating and then destroying. There's a few other cards like this. Maybe the most well-known example is Murder But Blue, which is also a custom magic common trope. But this is another style of Hellscube card that I think every cube needs a few of. These get boring, pretty quickly, but just the first 2 to remind you, hey, the magic color pie is really interesting and it's really neat, and also sometimes you can do silly stuff like this. We've got, quote, you know exactly what I mean. It's a 2/2 for 1 and a blue. Artifact creature Food Illusion. It has the Leyline ability, the Illusion ability, and the Food ability. This is just one of Hellscube's favorite things to do. To just find some other card or ability and just shorthand it. Food ability appears on a lot of cards, especially because food doesn't inherently give its ability to non-tokens. So you've got to be able to put it on if you want your card to be a food, but it still takes up an awful lot of wordiness. By just putting the food ability, you can kind of shorthand it in a way that most people will know exactly what you mean. I really love how nonsensical the art is on this one as well. The art even apologizes, saying, I get the art isn't very well executed, but you know what I mean. This is exactly the sort of art that I would have been doing back in Hellscube 1, where I just kind of slap a bunch of stuff on haphazardly and hope it looks good, if I even bother doing art at all. And the card as a whole also feels very much like the sort of card that I would want to do. It's not quite as elegant as, say, Dennis, but it still is really lean, really clean. One final thing is you can see Hellscube's lack of QA. The Leyline ability doesn't have a period after it. The other 2 abilities both do. Next up, we've got White Ramp. 1 and a white for a creature wall. It's a 1/5 with Defender and tap. Vehicles you control gain flying until end of turn. This is another of those all-time Hellscube 1 classics. Right up there was Thinking About Volleyballs. I remember when I saw this card first posted, everyone loved it. It's just so simple. You take a concept of ramp, which pretty much every Magic player knows is all about making your mana go faster. You can have a mana dork, you can go find a land, maybe it's an artifact. And then white, which traditionally doesn't get much ramp, and you combine the 2 and you get, well, nothing really. Nothing that cares about ramping. Instead, you just get a ramp where your vehicles can jump off of. The art is also pretty evocative of Hellscube 1 style, where it's just taking a pre-existing art and then just color shifting it. All in all, this is just another really simple, elegant design, and if you haven't noticed by now, I love elegance. We've got Spell Slang. 1 and a blue for an instant. Choose 1. Blink target creature. Bounce target creature. Target player puts the top 5 cards of their library into their graveyard. And loot 2. Once again, I feel like I'm aging myself when I look at this card, because the original card, its third ability was target player mills 5. The joke, of course, being that all of these are informal abilities. We know what blinking target creature should do, or bouncing, or looting 2. It falls in the same sort of vein as you know exactly what I mean. However, after this card got accepted into Hellscube, just a few months later, Wizards officially keyworded mill. And so suddenly Spell Slang isn't quite as funny, because 3 of the abilities are the shorthand, and 1 of the abilities is what Wizards does. The fix, I think, still maintains the elegance by unkeywording mill. It's not often that we have retroactive changes to a card's text, but I think Spell Slang is one of the best ones. Really Ancient Grudge. 1 and a red for an instant. Destroy target artifact. Flash back for a green. If you are thinking to yourself, this is just Ancient Grudge, you are right. In fact, this card, it's just another of that genre of taking an existing Magic card and almost keeping it exactly the same. The only difference is it's in a really old border. You can even see the Odyssey set symbol there. Or, I think that's Odyssey. It might be Mirage or something. And then it's just memeing off of a really popular meme card, Ancient Grudge. Though, we don't see much of that nowadays. I think it's just been outclassed, and people have forgotten how kind of corny the flavor text is. And there's nothing truly revolutionary in really Ancient Grudge, but I still wanted to include it because it's always been a card that I really liked. Again, we keep coming back to elegance. Dark Ritual, but what if it's purple? For a hybrid 1/purple, it's an instant, and it has add 3 purple. This card, when it was originally submitted, only cost purple instead of the 1/purple. It was then requested to be errated because purple isn't that common. And I'm getting ahead of myself a bit. If you've never seen purple before, it's a different color of mana. Any time an ability can add 1 mana of any color, for example, it can add purple. There's also some cards that just have an inherent ability to add purple. I don't know who first did purple. In fact, I think it predates Hellscube. I remember reading that Wizards considered adding a 6th color back in Future Sight block. But it's just really representative of Hellscube's slogan, what Wizards of the Coast wouldn't do. They have had 30-some years to try and decide if they wanted to add another color, and the closest they did was adding colorless mana. Despite this, a lot of purple cards don't end up the funniest, and Dark Ritual, but what if it's purple, definitely falls into that camp. I still wanted to include it because of how instrumental purple as a whole has been to Hellscube. Every odd-numbered cube, it's kind of been written that it needs to have purple. Hellscube 1 had purple, Hellscube 2 didn't. When Hellscube 3 had purple in it as well, people said, this looks a bit like a trend. Hellscube 4, it was a vintage cube, it didn't have purple. And then by the time we got to Hellscube 5, there was a bit of a discussion on the Discord server because a lot of people wanted a Commander cube, but also didn't want purple. And if we just followed the general numbering, next up would be Hellscube 5, that would have purple because it's an odd number. I was actually the one who came up with the, if I say so, brilliant idea of, well, let's just skip Hellscube 5. We can go straight from 4 to 6. it doesn't matter. And that's exactly what happened. We went straight to Hellscube 6, we had a Commander Cube. After that we went to Hellscube 7, where we included purple because it was odd. Hellscube 8 didn't, and now we're in the planning stage for Hellscube 9, where once again people are thinking, it's going to be an odd number. Are we going to have purple? Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. This card kind of is representative of some of the problems that purple can have if it's not done particularly well, where it just kind of feels like a color shift. There are a lot of really unique ways to use purple, especially relating to the sideboard, but we'll get to those in due course. Next up, we've got, no name. It's a 3/1 legendary creature human superhero. It has dash for red-white, and dash can't be blocked except by creatures with haste. Now, the rules text is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Obviously, this card doesn't have a name, and yet everyone refers to it as dash. And this is, of course, a reference to the Incredibles character, who is super fast and named Dash. There's a few other cards in this vein where they've got, unlike Dennis the Menace, where Dennis is in the title and Menace is in the rules, they just don't have a name, and their kind of character name appears as rules text because it's a pre-existing magic ability. Everyone will call this card Dash. Even the card itself calls it Dash. I like this design. I tend to like these. Again, it falls similarly to Dennis the Menace, and I keep coming back to that card because I really like it. But overall, this card, it's just, again, simple. I think it was the first one that did this naming scheme of, well, not having a name. We've got the 4/4 of Hearts. It's a creature playing card. It has lifelink. It's a 4/4 and it costs 3 and a red. This is pretty straightforward. Hellscube has a long-standing tradition of taking cards from other card games and then slotting them in. I can think of a few Balatro cards, a few Yu-Gi-Oh cards, a few Pokemon cards. We even have the Get Out of Jail Free card that I did. But this is just going back to the basics. Let's just find a playing card, give it an extra number so it can have a stat, and then a mana cost and a single ability. Hearts, that's obviously lifelink, it cares about healing. And then, sure, it can have playing card. This would predate Time Lord. I'm curious if nowadays playing card would be considered a single creature type, or if it would be two different types. I would tend to lean towards it being a single type, but I suppose if someone in the future wanted to make just a creature playing, you could be my guest. Yet another fight card. 1 and a green for an instant, you know what to fucking do. Pretty straightforward. There's a few of these floating around where it's just a card, and it just does what you expect the card to do. It's a bit different from You Know Exactly What I Mean, because at least for what I mean, you will kind of know what it means based on the leyline ability. For this one, you just have to know what fighting cards do. If you've played a bit of Magic, especially in Limited, you can see some fight cards popping up. You'll probably know. But if not, because fight is keyworded, you could just Google fight MTG, and you'd probably figure out what it does. Nowadays, I don't know if a card like this would get in. The Veto Council has been more insistent on having good reminder text, which, I mean, the cube is intended to be playable. I still miss this kind of card where it's just, maybe you have to interpret what it does rather than reading it word for word, but most people wouldn't have any issues if they're playing Hellscube. Really Elder Gargaroth. It is a 3/3 creature Elder Beast for 2 green. Trampleth and Vigilance. Whenever really Elder Gargaroth doth attack or block, choose 1. Create yon 1/1 green beast creature token. You gain 1 life. Look at the top card of yon library. If it beeth a land card, you may reveal it and put it into yon hand. Apologies for the accent. This is not necessarily the most interesting mechanically card. It's kind of just an Elder Gargaroth, but a bit smaller. But I really, really love the aesthetics of this card. In earlier Hellscubes, there's not nearly as much of these unique frames, frame breaks, anything like that as compared to some of the newer Hellscubes. So being able to see a card like this, I would love to know if the art's hand-drawn by the creator. I would assume not, but the frame might be. All in all, it's just a sort of really visually appealing card that more than makes up for the fact that the mechanics are, well, I won't say bland, but not necessarily something Wizards wouldn't print. Big Lion. A 10/10 creature god for white. If you weren't around 5 years ago online, you might not have heard the Big Lion meme. I'll be honest, I don't know a ton of it. It's just, the Big Lion. Not even a legendary creature, not even a cat, just Big Lion. Speaking of lions, we've got Woe Lions. It's 2/1. Creature Space Cat for purple. You may reveal Woe Lions as you draft it. If you do, add a Nebula to your draft pool. And it's got Miracle for a hybrid Izzet. Something I forgot to mention when we were talking about Dark Ritual, but what if it's purple, is what makes purple so interesting is you can't add an unlimited number of purple basics. The purple basic, the Nebula, does exist, but you need to find your purple sources. So Woe Lions by itself is not a particularly impressive card to put into your deck. It's a 2/1 that costs a rare mana, and it's got Miracle, which is slightly less rare, but you've still got to be able to pay for the Miracle cost. However, part of the benefit is when you draft it, you get a free Nebula. Nebula isn't something that you would want to draft on its own, but combining it with a, alright card, it makes it a lot more palatable. And there's a lot of cards in Hells 1 or Hells 3 that will just come along with a free Nebula. And it gets expanded with a mechanic called Draft Partner in a few cubes. Draft Partner is kind of like Partner from Battle Bond, except you get to draft one card with Draft Partner, and it'll come with a second card straight away. Again, the card isn't particularly impressive or unique, but it's this sort of purple identity of space, and coming with basic purple lands, the Nebula, which I find really interesting if you consider Hellscube as a whole. Once Upon a Tithe, it's 1 white for an instant. If this spell is the first spell you've cast this game, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. Choose 1, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1, or look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you were thinking to yourself, hang on, this just looks like Once Upon a Time combined with Mana Tithe, you would be right. This is another Hellscube classic of combining 2 cards based on their titles, and then just seeing what effect pops out. I wanted to highlight Once Upon a Tithe in particular because of its relevance to the 4-card blind format. This is a variation of 3-card blind that we play on the Discord server, where you get 4 cards from anywhere across Hellscube, with a few exceptions. And then you get a deck, and it plays against other of these 4-card blind decks. The gimmick is that both decks play as perfectly as possible. They both have complete knowledge of what the other player has, and generally whoever's running the tournament will just simulate both decks playing against each other. Once on the play, once on the draw. This card has been a perennial staple of 4-card blind ever since the first tournament back in, I want to say 2020, which I won using a copy of it, because it's a free way of getting a counter spell. Sure, you need to have not cast a spell first, but being able to tax any of your opponent's spells without having to pay yourself is really strong. Especially if you combine this with a land that can attack, or with free spells of your own. Force of Bill is particularly good. It's a 2/3 that you can exile a white card from your hand. So you can, in matchups where the Tithe isn't useful, you can just exile it to cast your Force of Bill. Anyway, I just really love 4-card blind. I love the impact that Once Upon a Tithe has had on the format. And I love the general Hellscube archetype of smashing 2 names together because they sound the same. It's a 2/1 for red, creature Speedbird. It has haste, 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 and haste. We haven't talked a ton about Hellscube 1 archetypes so far. Unlike in a lot of the future cubes, these weren't predetermined. They were just they were just built up as people saw cards and thought, I can make a card that's similar, I can make a card that works together. Haste is one of those archetypes. In normal Magic, haste doesn't stack, but in Hellscube, there's a lot of cards that care about how many hastes the creature has. It might give a discount, you might get to draw cards based on a number of hastes. So I want it to include at least one haste archetype card. And I just love haste, 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 and how maybe about 200, 300 letters on this page is just a capital A. Speaking of archetypes, we have Colossal Dreadmaw. It's a 6/6 creature dinosaur for 4 black with trample. On it, it's got an adventure, an instant negate for 1 and a blue, counter target non-creature spell. Just like with I'm using this card to stand in for the entirety of the Dreadmaw archetype. Dreadmaw is just caring about Colossal Dreadmaw. There's a few cards that care about your devotion to Dreadmaw, which checks to see how many, or what type of similar card attributes your creatures have compared to Dreadmaw. For instance, seeing if it's a dinosaur, or if it has trample or 6 power. This one is just kind of the memeiest of memes, because it combines Dreadmaw with Negate, which you might remember from the Revel in Riches fiasco. Despite this card is extremely straightforward. It's just 2 black-bordered magic cards stapled one onto the other. Cards like this don't tend to exist much nowadays, and when they do, they need to be particularly evocative. This probably wouldn't get accepted nowadays, especially since it would be hard for it to find a slot. But it's just pure. It's just simple. It's part of what makes Hellscube 1 so unique. There wasn't any pressure from slots if it got accepted, and if it wasn't particularly broken, and if it still played at all like a Magic card, it could probably get in. Speaking of it, a few cards ago, we've got Murder But Blue. 1 blue instant. Put target creature on top of its owner's library. That player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. This is another classic custom Magic trope. You'll see a lot of new designers design this and the sorcery counter spell. I just felt like I needed to include this card for completeness. The Obamanomicon. Black, black, black legendary artifact. Before the game begins, you may reveal the Obamanomicon from your deck and ante any number of non-basic cards you own from outside the game. Pay 1 life, put a card you own anteed with the Obamanomicon into your hand. For reasons I don't fully understand, because it happened before even I joined the Discord server, there was a bit of a mini theme in Hellscube 1 about Obama and anteing cards. This is just one example thereof. It's just, I really like ante being used in a limited format, where maybe you play a few matches, you take your opponent's cards, you swap them around, but at the end of the day, no one's really lost anything of material value. It's not like you're anteing a Black Lotus or a Mox or anything like that, like if it was in actual normal Magic. I think that this is one of the, maybe not defining features, but one of the charms of Hellscube 1, where you've got these really strange Obama anti-cards. Next up, we have Wuhan. It's a land. It enters the battlefield tap. It can tap for a blue or a black, and it has 2 and a black tap. Target creature gains Infect until end of turn. Activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. There's an entire cycle of these dual lands that were all named for cities. I want it to include Wuhan because of its ominence, because it was originally posted, I want to say, January or February 2020. Right before the pandemic had fully started, but after we'd heard about this virus that might be coming out to get us. Forest 2. Legendary basic Planeswalker land Forest. It starts with 50 loyalty. It has +7. You may look at the bottom card of your library. If you do, shuffle your library. -7, give a name to target creature. And -100, add green, green. This is one of the original kind of do-nothing cards that then it was found to actually do some stuff. Specifically, the -7 has some interesting interactions with legendary creatures, because you can name a creature the same name as another legendary creature, and then your opponent has to sacrifice one of them. There's also a few cards that care about specifically owning or controlling a card with a given name, but at the time of the design, it just felt like a sort of do-nothing, haha, look, if you can +7 enough times, eventually it can tap to add 2 green. This card was ultimately cut from Hellscube 1 because most of the time it did almost nothing, except for a few times where it felt like a better Caracas. So, in all, I don't mind that it was cut, but I think it's an important part of the Hellscube 1 history to see such a almost controversial design that still originally got into the cube. Avatar of Discord. It's 3 in a red for a legendary creature Avatar. It starts as a 4/4, and it has 0. Look at the top 4 most recent messages of Discord tab #Avatar. For any messages, that is attack, gain +1/-1, defense, gain -1/+1, and evasion, gain shadow. These effects last until this ability is activated again. Any player may activate this ability once per turn. This Discord channel still exists. It's been almost 6 years at this point, and Avatar of Discord is still being changed. I think that's a testament to how iconic the card is. And to be perfectly honest, I think there are some people who would join the Discord server and find the Avatar channel and have no idea that there's a card associated with it, and just think that it's some sort of meme channel where people post a bunch of random attack, defense, and evasion words. Obviously, the ideal circumstance is you can get a 7-1 with Shadow, but that can be quickly turned into an 8-0 and die if you're not careful. Amethyst Buttplug. 2 mana for a legendary artifact. All numbers on other cards are increased by 1. This card, it just has so many rules confusions. What is a number? Does it include a cost? Does it include power toughness? Does it include just straight up word numbers, like TWO for 2? Does it include words in the name of a card? Does it include numbers in the bottom bit, like the 1 of 1 or the 2019? You could probably find an answer, but I think it's more fun if you're playing this with your play group and you guys all argue over an amethyst butt plug. Also, why is it a butt plug? Why is it amethyst? Why is it legendary? Why can there only be one amethyst butt plug? This is just some of the questions that I have about this card. Why is the art so empty? Was this drawn in Microsoft Paint? Some questions we may never get the answer to. Balls Jr. 1/2/3 is Druidic Vow. It's a 1-mana sorcery. As an additional cost to cast Balls Jr. 1/2/3 is Druidic Vow, choose a mana cost and pay that cost. Create a token copy of a random card with that cost and cast it without paying its mana cost. This card is probably the second most representative card of all of Hellscube 1. It is so iconic. Balls Jr. 1/2/3 was originally a content creator for Hellscube, though they haven't posted much in 5 years or so. The card itself feels very Hellsy. It feels like something that Wizards could never print, but also is something that feels fun and interesting. The trick with this card, by the way, is to find out what cards have a unique mana cost. I know there's a Scryfall tag for that. If you can find that, and you pay that specific mana cost, you will always get this card. Or the card that you want, sorry. And you have this one colorless tax to have a bunch of flexibility. Plus, you can always just random it and go, alright, I'm going to pay black-red, and let's roll the dice and see what we get. This card is sometimes banned from 4-card blind, and sometimes, if you include it, the moderator will say, fine, but you have to simulate your own deck, because I'm not going through every single possibility. And last but not least, we've got r/Hellscube Victory. It costs a full Wooburg plus a purple mana. It's a legendary snow enchantment. It can be your commander, it has hexproof, and it has 0. If the following conditions are fulfilled, you win the game. This ability can't be frozen. You have won a minigame, your devotion to Dreadmaw is 2 or more, 1 or more cards on the stack are frozen, you own a card with End in Exile, you control a permanent or have a card in your graveyard with Need, you control a permanent with 2 or more instances of haste, you control a vehicle or own a card in the auto zone, and you control a permanent that can be targeted by Indicate Mistake. This is the Hellscube 1 Sampler Pack. It tells you all of the main archetypes of Hellscube 1. We've got mini-games, which generally appear on instants and sorceries. They have abilities that happen if you win them. We've got Devotion for Dreadmaw. We talked about that a bit. We've got cards being frozen on the stack. This is an ability where a card will just be stuck on the stack. Other cards can still be cast on top of it, and then eventually, after it thaws out, the card can be cast. We've got cards with End in Exile, so Means to End is kind of like a precursor to the Oh, it's the mechanic from Innistrad where the humans become spirits. I forget what that's called. But basically, you cast a spell with means, and then it'll come back to your hand flipped around on the end side. We've got Permanence with Need. That's the precursor to Companions we talked about. Haste, we covered that. Vehicles is another pretty popular Hellscube 1 archetype. I didn't include any of the Vehicles cards, except kind of White Ramp, but I wanted to include that just because it's such a evocative card. And the Auto Zone is a special zone where creatures can be sent, and they can't do much, but they can still crew your vehicles. And lastly, Indicate Mistake is a card that destroys a card if it has bad templating. I think it's implied that this card has bad templating, just so that you can always have that condition triggered. You can also see up at the top, we've got the snow mana that's being used to represent purple mana. That's appeared on a few cards back in Hellscube 1. And it can even be your commander. Not that Hell's Commander was a format back then, and not that it really is a format nowadays, but it's just fun to see the summation of all of Hellscube 1 distilled into a single, artless, pretty bland card. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of my favorite Hellscube 1 cards, some of the cards that I think have really been trendsetters over the years. If you've got any cards that you think I should have included, you can put them down in the comments. And I'll see you tomorrow in my first Hellscube 2 episode. Thanks for watching. I hope you had a good time watching.